Hey everyone, I'm Nicole
and Rebecca
from conquerbooks.com.
and today we're reading Fall or Dodge in Hell by Neal Stephenson, a story about the digital afterlife. $883 pages?
Welcome to the Bit World. You've graduated from meat space and you are now in the digital afterlife.
Weird. What's it made out of?
Adamant.
What's that, a rock?
No, it's when people won't change their opinions.
Huh. Well, it kind of looks like the real world, but a little different.
It's whatever Dodge wants it to be.
Fall or Dodge in Hell centers around Dodge, an eccentric billionaire who gained his money off of the video game industry. He goes in one day for a routine procedure, dies on the operating table, but his family finds in his will that he stipulated that his body be frozen until there's technology available to upload his brain to a computer system. And so very quickly you get into a surprising legal battle within a science fiction novel. What are they going to do with the body? Who is responsible? How much funds should they stipulate goes towards this advance in technology to try and make this dream a reality? And very quickly you're faced with all of these different questions that you don't think about because people typically don't freeze themselves hoping to have their brains uploaded. So really interesting premise. I think that's what brought us into the book initially.
Yeah.
It just seemed like a fun premise.
Yeah, it certainly does. It was a lengthy book. It was a lot to get through. And in reading the whole thing, I couldn't help but notice that there were so many blurbs talking about how awesome this book was. It was, really hyped up. It was supposed to be really incredible. And Neal Stephenson has a fantastic reputation. Mm-hmm. I've never heard anything but good things about him. So I had a lot of good expectations for this book. It fell short, honestly. And it's happened more times than I can count that we've picked up a book that has been said to be amazing, the next groundbreaking literary achievement. Mm-hmm. And it just isn't. There's nothing wrong with them. They're very human. They're good reads, but they're not quite what they've been built up to be. I think that these days reviews on Amazon are more critical than ever because the people who write the blurbs to talk about how amazing these books are paid to write those blurbs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we wanted to bring this up front because we are reviewing books and we try to pick books that we, predict that we'll really love, but sometimes we just don't get into the book as much as we think we will. And that's not necessarily a problem because not every book is for every reader, right? There's all kinds of niche genres and storylines that really connect with us. And so we just wanted to be upfront that, this book really wasn't for us, but this is our review about it. And hopefully we can help you decide if you're interested in reading or not. There were some really fun things at the start of the story, which, as you can tell, it's a pretty hefty book. So the start of the story really is, an entire book within itself. But after Dodge dies and his family freezes his body, Corvallis, who is the executioner of the will, goes into searching how to make this a reality for his friend Dodge. And Dodge had initially put this in his will kind of as a early 90s, hey, we're in the tech world, we're gonna, revolutionize the world. He didn't really think through all of the different implications and what it would do to his family after he died to try and make this a reality for him. And so it's interesting following Corvallis' story as he's trying to make this work. The years go by, nothing has really happened because technology isn't there, and suddenly there's an explosion in a small town called Moab. And this was a really neat storyline that I liked because it dealt with how a tragedy in the country is quickly overtaken by the media and the social network and all of the conversation that's had online. I won't give away anything, but that was a pretty exciting bit. I felt like the characters that came out, Maeve was a paraplegic that Corvallis met. She leads rafting trips in this small town, and she's kind of his into this tragedy that happened. And it was a really good and timely discussion about what the internet does, the power that all of these voices have to completely ruin or make somebody's career, the power that the voices have to get stories out there when it seems like nobody else is paying attention to the most important story. But then also the mindless feel that sometimes the internet takes, like it's its own animal that's just eating things around it and nobody can stop it. I thought that really showed Stephenson's background. He's a futurist. He works in the tech industry. He's associated with a lot of big tech names like Jeff Bezos, and you really get the sense that he has thought critically about this and he knows what he's talking about.
He's a big guy in the business world. He, like Rebecca said, got a job being a futurist just off of his first novels because he's got an uncanny ability to predict where technology is going next. And you can tell very clearly from this book, very, very clearly, like this was the biggest part of the book, I think, that he knows how to project on the steps that technology will take. And I think that that is his number one strength in this book, is that it's almost this narrative speculation on the steps that technology will take into the future. You can see very clearly where he starts with the internet and its fluidity and the way that exactly how Rebecca was describing. And he moves forward into death technologies. And I would say if you're an investor, this book is like gold.
Yeah, lots of business startup ideas.
Yeah, very much so.
This book was a little bit hard for me to read, even though I enjoyed the beginning. It's very lengthy, and I don't have a problem with long books. I love diving into the Outlander series. I love Game of Thrones and J.K. Rowling's, and I like getting invested into long series with long books. But for me, this just didn't really feel cohesive. It felt like a bunch of different novels kind of packed up together, not quite crossing where they should. But then also, I had a problem with a lot of the perspectives in the book. So it's dealing with the tech industry, so you're going to have a cast of characters that maybe live a different lifestyle than much of the country. And especially if you're thinking about who is going to freeze their brain and hope to be uploaded to this digital afterlife, it's probably going to be this eccentric billionaire who lives on the West Coast. But it didn't stop there. I felt like all of the characters were kind of a one-percenter in their own right. And even those who weren't were quickly streamlined into lots of money, lots of access, the ability to do whatever they were doing. And I think Stephenson had a good take on some of the things that maybe people don't appreciate about people who get into the tech industry, like maybe people who are dealing with autism in the midst of their career, but that enables them to do some really original work. And with one of my favorite characters, Maeve, having a physical disability, she didn't let that slow her down, and she was one of the most outspoken individuals in the book, which I thought was really neat. But it still had a sense that if you're going to be one of the people who reaches immortality, you're going to be somebody who has a lot of money and who has a lot of connections.
Mm-hmm. After Dodge dies on the surgical table, the story starts up following his niece, Sophia, and she was probably my favorite character. And you follow her as she grows up, and she starts to get into some of these technologies that come about that are able to restart Dodge's brain. And then after Dodge's brain starts, we kind of split the novel and we start to follow Dodge a little bit more. And he's kind of building this, I guess you could call it an afterlife, but it's really just an alternate world. Following that, there were a lot of biblical references in this new world that kind of touched on some of the references in the current world with Moab and one character named Enoch. You could find these little metaphors all over the book, and that was fun. That was interesting. He did a great job with that. I think that my biggest complaint is that there was a lack of tension, so there wasn't a whole lot of page turning going on. Mm-hmm. If you're going to get into it, you're going to get deep into it, and you're going to look for technology and metaphors.
And the arches were very, very long to try and come to the conclusion of this big book and figure out where the characters go. You have to learn about a whole nother cast of characters and a whole nother, several different worlds and several different locations in the United States where things happen. And it just slowed things down. Mm-hmm. I think that like a book this size is definitely fair game to still be a page turner, but it wasn't.
No. Oh, one of the things I liked that we put into our skit earlier was the word adamant. This is an example of the metaphors that he used. He was talking about adamant throughout this digital world that Dodge was building, and I felt so much like it was a kind of rock. Like he just made it sound like this material you were building a world with. And then halfway through the book, I clued in, hey, that's an actual word, and I looked it up, and it means to be certain or to be unwilling to change your opinion. And that's an example of some of the metaphors he uses that are fun to discover, fun to uncover in the book.
Yeah, it's definitely a smart read. I feel like you could read this book and gain stuff every time you picked it up, but it feels more scientific, or it feels more like it might appeal to somebody who is thinking about the future from a more technical standpoint than somebody who wants to dive into a book that they're really going to fall in love with. We're looking forward to our next book, The Wanderers by Chuck Wendig. Comes out July 2nd.
He's a great author to follow if you don't follow him already. His blog is stupendous. And The Wanderers should be pretty great. It is about a character named Shayna who wakes up. Her little sister is in a sleepwalking state and kind of just goes out into the street, and she has a very clear destination. And as the character is following her sister, they accumulate more people, some of which are the sleepwalkers and some of which are just the guardians of the sleepwalkers. But the book is more about the fear of the virus than it is, or the might not be a virus, but the fear of the sleepwalking than it is actually about the sleepwalking. Should be good.
It's already being compared to The Stand by Stephen King and Station 11, so we're looking forward to it.
Yeah.
See you next time.
Bye.